In the grim role of the fallen, no tragedy is so stark as that of the IIIrd Legion, for it was not by their weakness that they were damned, but by their greatest strength, honed into a weapon against the very Imperium they swore to perfect. They were the Emperor's children, artisans of war, seekers of flawless victory. Their pursuit of perfection was to be crowned by the Maraviglia, a celebration of imperial culture on a newly compliant world. Imagine the scene: halls of gleaming marble, the gilded aquila promising a golden age, and the pure, ordered music of the classic harp symbolizing the height of human artistry. But the symphony performed that day was a betrayal. It was a composition of alien origin, a sonic key designed to unlock the gates of perception and sanity. The pristine marble of their ideals did not just crack, it shattered, exposing a hellish reality of pure sensation. The performance did not elevate the soul, it flayed it, transforming the legionaries from paragons into fiends. From this fateful symphony that shattered the veil, the psycho-sonic warriors known as the Noise Marines were born, their unending scream replacing the tempered notes of the past. Thus the desire for perfection became an insatiable hunger for excess. The quest for the ultimate aesthetic experience was answered by the Dark Prince of Chaos, and the Emperor's children offered their souls for a single, perfect, eternal sensation. This was the first note in their Symphony of Damnation. No legion was so lauded nor so tragic as the IIIrd. The Emperor's children were not merely warriors. They were artisans of battle, composers of conquest. Their primarch Fulgrim believed a galaxy conquered by the sword alone was a barren wasteland, a victory without soul. This philosophy, this obsession, was built upon a trifold pillar of ideals, all balanced precariously upon the will of Fulgrim himself. First, martial excellence, for their warriors were flawless, their strategies elegant and without fault. Second, artistic beauty. Alone among the expeditionary fleets, the 28th carried thousands of mortal remembrances, poets and sculptors, tasked with capturing the glory of the crusade. But it was the third virtue that would prove to be their undoing, the pursuit of an unreachable perfection.
We have to be perfect, that is the least we can be, in the Emperor's service.
This impossible standard created a deep and desperate hunger within the Legion. A hunger for what, you ask? A hunger for the sublime, for the next sensory peak, the next experience that might finally satisfy their endless craving. And in the silent darkness between the stars, something heard their desperate prayer for perfection, and prepared to answer. This pursuit of flawlessness would lead the Emperor's children to the oceanic world of Laeran, and a campaign that would seal their doom, not with a final battle, but with a single seductive melody. Deep within a floating city of iridescent living coral, the Legion discovered what the xenos called their fane of excess. It was a temple dedicated to a power the Imperium did not yet comprehend. Archival records from the attached remembrances are disjointed, bordering on hysterical. The painter Serena D'Angelis wrote,
"It was a symphony of impossibilities. Music that could be seen, colors that screamed, architecture that writhed in time with my own pulse."
This sensory overload, this mesmerizing alien aesthetic, was not merely a passive environment, it was an active agent of corruption, a psychic hook that embedded itself in the minds of Astartes and mortals alike. Fulgrim's legion departed Laeran, leaving the world a sterile monument to their martial perfection. They did not know they carried the true corruption with them, a desperate new craving for extremes that no battlefield victory could ever satisfy. Perfection had become a prison. Following the pacification of the Laer, a new philosophy took root within the 28th expedition. A feverish hunger for novel sensation, a desperate flight from the ennui of mere excellence. This spiritual poison found its perfect vessel in the renowned composer Bequa Kynska. A hedonist by reputation, Kynska's immense talent was now shackled to a jaded palate that classical forms could no longer satisfy. The whispers of the Laer temple had not just touched the primarch, they had infected the very culture he curated. Her old works were abandoned, their sheet music like ashes. In their place a new composition began to form, a symphony of pure, unfiltered sensation. She called it the Maraviglia. As she worked, observers noted the very notes seemed to writhe on the page, the staves burning with a cold, violet fire, transmuting sound into a vector for something other. She promised the primarch a performance that would eclipse all art that had come before it.
A wonder.
What no one questioned was what new, terrible senses would be required to perceive it. Perfection for the 3rd Legion was not merely an aspiration. It was a creed. This mandate extended beyond the crucible of war, infecting the very soul of their culture. On the decks of the Pride of the Emperor, the fleet's most celebrated artists, once patrons of imperial truth, became the first true prophets of its decay. Consider the painter Serena d'Angelis. Her works had once captured the austere glory of the Great Crusade, but after the compliance of the xenos world Laeran, something shattered within her. The world's impossible vibrant colors became an obsession she could never replicate. A remembrancer attached to her studio recorded her descent in a panicked log entry. She weeps before her canvases, lamenting the poverty of her palette. Last night she screamed that only life itself held the right hue. Driven to utter madness, she abandoned her oils and pigments. Her new materials were blood and excrement, harvested from victims she murdered to secure the perfect materials. Then there was Ostian Delafort, the master sculptor. He resisted the creeping decadence, clinging to traditional artistic truth. He saw the madness for what it was, and refused to yield. For this defiance, he was made into a grotesque lesson. The new masters of the 3rd Legion murdered him, and in a final act of blasphemy, took his corpse and impaled it upon the demonic blade of the lyre, incorporating it into a horrific display, a literal and figurative corruption of the ideal form. The violation of stone and canvas was a prelude, with their artists carving monuments from corpses and painting portraits with viscera. The Astartes of the Emperor's children were learning a terrible new aesthetic. The pursuit of sensation, no matter how depraved, had supplanted the quest for perfection, and a legion that had mastered the art of atrocity would soon seek to practice it on a galactic scale.
Kynska's blasphemy was not merely in turning from the Emperor's light, but in the belief that the immaterium itself could be tamed, catalogued, and weaponized through mortal artifice. This recovered schematic details one such instrument of unreality. Its process begins with the obscene. For an input it draws not power, but corrupted Slaanesh inspiration directly from a conceptual node of the warp designated Blasphemous, Fane of Excess. This psychic effluent is then channeled into the mechanism, a monstrous contraption of industrial pipes, shuddering bellows and electrical generators, twisting sane technology into an engine of madness. Its purpose is to translate the impossible frequencies of the warp into a physical medium. The output is a sonic assault that is disorienting, stimulating, and, ultimately, outright murderous, capable of dissolving a soldier's sanity before bursting their organs. These instruments were not simply weapons. They were tuning forks, designed to resonate with the fabric of real space itself, and Kynska was merely the orchestra's first conductor.
The pursuit of perfection had led not to transcendence, but to the grand theatre aboard the Pride of the Emperor, La Fenice. It had once been the Remembrance's stage, a place for celebrating the triumphs of the Great Crusade. Now it was a temple to excess. Thousands packed the stalls and boxes, almost 3,000 of Fulgrim's own Astartes alongside 6,000 mortals, their faces feverish with a dark, unnatural anticipation. The very air was an assault, thick with a humid, sweet-scented musk that clung to the throat. Gone were the eagles and laurels of the Imperium. In their place, statues of androgynous horned figures loomed from the alcoves. Above the stage, where the Aquila should have hung, was a portrait of the primarch Fulgrim, rendered in such a disturbing, sensuous manner that it felt like a violation to behold. This was no longer a military vessel, it was a shrine to a new, terrible faith. The curtain was about to rise, not on a play, but on a sacrament of damnation, and for the thousands gathered in the cloying dark, there would be no escape from the art to come.
The temptations of the archenemy are not always found in forbidden texts or whispered promises. Sometimes, the path to damnation is paved with sensation itself, a siren's call delivered through sound, sight, and touch. Inquisitorial archives contain fragmented analyses of such weapons. One picked record, designated the Overture of Madness, charts the progress of this specific corruption. It describes a catalyst, the Apostate Kynska, conducting not with precision, but with a thrashing, violent ecstasy. Her performance is a calculated assault. As the data graph shows, the initial, sensory output of her music builds, a discordant melody teasing the senses, riding just below the cruy, normal human threshold of psychological endurance. This is debate. Then, the music erupts. The activation curve spikes violently into an overload of pure, unfiltered stimuli, where ecstasy and agony become indistinguishable. It is here that the soul is scoured clean, for as the record states, the discordant sound demands a complete physical and emotional surrender. The horror of Kynska's symphony is not merely what it does to an individual audience in a sealed room. The true terror lies in its scalability. For what happens when a single note can be amplified to echo across a city? What happens when an entire world is made the unwilling audience for this overture?
They called it the Maraviglia, a symphony for the Emperor's children. Its composer promised a new sound for a new imperium, but the frequencies she wove were not of this material sphere. As the composition built, it achieved what no sane artist would dare. It resonated at a pitch that thinned the very barrier of reality. From the orchestra pit it began, not just sound but light, a liquid, multicolored effluence pouring into the hall, defying gravity, defying reason. The music became physically visible, taking the form of living, slithering serpents of pure sound. They unspooled from the stage, writhing through the assembled nobles and Astartes of the 3rd Legion, caressing them, whispering unheard truths directly into their souls. Remembrancer Serena D'Angelis, a survivor, recorded in her log.
It was beautiful, and it was vile. A violation of the senses that you could not tear yourself away from.
The symphony was not a performance, it was a baptism, a sorcerous rite that opened a door within the souls of the Emperor's children, and through that door, a terrible new thirst had been awakened. The final note of the Maraviglia did not bring silence. It brought a scream, a single unified shriek of 1,000,000 souls breaking at once. On the blood-slicked floor of the great amphitheater, the audience surrendered. The symphony had been a key, unlocking forbidden pathways in the mind, and now the floodgates were annihilated. As the record attests, inhibitions were instantly obliterated. Astartes of the 3rd Legion, paragons of perfection, descended into base murder alongside the mortals they were sworn to protect. Friends tore each other apart with a lover's passion. The very air grew thick with the stench of blood and spent desire as the Emperor's children crushed the skulls of their followers to drink the vitae within, seeking a new, more potent sensation. This was not merely an atrocity, it was a baptism. In that orgiastic slaughter, the Emperor's children were not destroyed, they were consecrated to a new master, and every death on that stage was an offering to the Dark Prince who now owned their souls. It was the sound of a dying star given voice, the final resonant chord of a symphony composed to unwrite creation itself, performed for an audience of transhuman demigods. The music, a psychic key of impossible complexity, unlocked the gates of the Empyrean. At the performance's climax, the lead singer Coralina Seneca became a living gateway. Her bones snapped, and her flesh was made canvas for a greater demon of Slaanesh to tear its way into the material realm. As this new god thing unfurled its exquisite limbs, its lesser kin, the demonettes, spilled from the wound in reality. They moved like dancers through the orchestra, their razor-sharp claws instruments of a different kind of music. They carved through the mortal musicians, but there was no terror in the cultists' eyes. The composer Bequa Kynska was impaled through the chest. Her last act was to smile, a look of absolute soul-searing triumph. The loyalist Astartes who witnessed this horror were broken by it.
But for the Emperor's children, this was not an atrocity. It was an apotheosis. The Legion did not see a massacre. They saw a masterpiece, and they roared their approval for an encore that would last 10,000 years.
The final note of the Maraviglia had faded, but the performance was not over. In the gore-splattered La Fenice Amphitheater, aboard the flagship Pride of the Emperor, the sudden silence was a physical assault. For the Astartes of the 3rd Legion, their senses flayed open and addicted to the symphony's impossible stimuli, this quiet was an agony beyond endurance. It was Captain Marius Verosian who became the first true apostle of the new sound. Maddened by the sensory void, he led a charge of his brethren from the stalls, not in retreat, but towards the orchestra pit. They fell upon the strange, alien instruments of the dead musicians, desperate to rekindle the cacophonous ecstasy. Their fumbling produced not music, but shrieking waves of pure destructive force. From his command balcony, the primarch Fulgrim watched this obscene birth and smiled.
My Emperor's children, what sweet music they make.
The silence was broken, not by music, but by the sound of reality tearing. The instruments of the Maraviglia, once tools of art, were now weapons of damnation. In the hands of the Astartes, their muscle memory repurposed for a new horrific purpose, elegant stringed mechanisms were shouldered like heavy bolters. Towering sonic pipes were aimed like artillery, fueled by the lingering psychic energies of the performance and the Legion's own desperate hunger. The devices hummed with the raw power of the warp. The first notes they played were not a melody, but a percussive barrage, thrumming bass frequencies struck with concussive force, shattering the remaining architecture of the Lefenis. Higher-pitched screeches liquefied flesh and boiled blood in the veins. On that broken stage, the Emperor's children had found their new voice. They had turned art into atrocity, and this first ugly song was merely a sound check for the Symphony of Damnation they would soon inflict upon the galaxy. The pursuit of perfection ended in an amphitheater of screams. At the climax of the Maraviglia, the Emperor's children did not die. They were reborn as the Kakophoni, the first of the damned chorus. This is the anatomy of their fall. The mind, once a bastion of tactical genius, was unmade. Neural pathways, forged for loyalty, were totally rewired. Their senses, honed for war, were turned inward. Hearing became a curse and a blessing, amplified 1,000 times, until the subtle rhythm of a comrade's blood pump was as loud as a bolter's report. They became connoisseurs of agony, their brains reconfigured to feel pleasure only from the deafening discordant noise of battle and the screams of the dying. To better voice their newfound passion, they mutilated themselves, grafting bizarre loudspeakers to their vocal cords, creating the doom siren. With this profane implant, they could unleash the psychic warp scream, a sonic blasphemy that was both music to their ears and damnation to all others. They carried their art into battle with the Blastmaster, a sonic weapon firing waves of pure destructive frequency, tuned to rupture flesh and shatter the thickest armor into dust. These were the first instruments of a new, terrible orchestra, but the nature of their new master is excess. A perfect scream, once heard, loses its novelty. The sensation fades. Thus began a new frantic quest, a hunt for new sounds, new experiences, and new atrocities on a scale the galaxy had never imagined. The grand performance known as the Maraviglia was a crucible. In its dissonant crescendo, the last vestiges of the 3rd Legion's aspiration were incinerated, forging something new, something utterly damned. The Kakophoni, where once their goal was the unattainable peak of flawless martial and artistic perfection, it became an endless chaotic pursuit of extreme sensation, a bottomless hunger that could never be filled. Their combat doctrine, once meticulous, disciplined and coordinated, devolved into a frenzied discordant spasm of violence. The master-crafted bolters and elegant blades, symbols of their quest for perfection, were cast aside. In their place came the horrific artistry of sonic blasters, doom sirens and psychoacoustics, weapons that turned the very concept of sound into an instrument of exquisite agony. The ultimate shift, the final act of their tragedy, was their allegiance. Loyalty to the Emperor of mankind was scoured away, replaced by utter devotion to the dark power that had answered their prayers for sensation. Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure. This irreversible descent was more than a fall from grace. It was the finalization of their tragedy. The 3rd Legion was dead. In its place stood a choir of monsters, their voices tuned to the frequency of pain, ready to sing the song of a new terrible age.